Welcome everyone. So in this video, we are going to discuss on the toxin release in Love Canal. Love Canal is named after a wide channel that was built in the 1890s near the Niagara Falls for the implementation of hydroelectric power station. This idea was owned by a man named William T. Love, and it was intended to become a group of dreams that will satisfy the need of the society. However, it ended up being one of the most horrifying environmental tragedies in America. So basically, Love suggests to dig a canal in between the lower and upper rivers of Niagara. So, there will be a strong possibility that electricity could be produced cheaply to power the sector and houses. Nevertheless, his project was struggled with difficulties, especially in withstanding economic problems such as the sudden fluctuation in the economy. In the end, the canal became an industrial chemical landfill. Citizens of Niagara Falls started to dump municipal waste into the canal, followed by dumping of waste by the Army of United States in consequence of World War II, and the situation was getting worse because the waste contained some leftovers of chemical used by the Army to create explosives. In 1942, Hooker Chemical purchased the canal and coated the contaminated part with clay. The company was being unethical because they decided to bury a huge amount of perilous waste, and the estimation was calculated to be 21,000 barrels of industrial disposal that include benzene and PCB. Hooker Chemicals offers the local school board to build new school on the property. The school council instantly construct an education institution on the land site and eventually market the nearby property in order to promote an existence of housing project around the school building. Therefore, there were almost 200 or more homes were constructed along the bank of the canal. In the middle of the construction, the clay that used to cap the canal and wall began to break, harming some metal barrels and caused leaking of the chemical waste into the resident ground. For the following 3 years, chemical began to seep frantically into the backyard of the houses around the canal. So the residents constantly expressed their dissatisfaction toward the unpleasant odors and substance that came up in their land. As a result, some of the local residents were diagnosed with major health issues, which were reported to be birth failure, cognition disorder, and chromosome abnormality. Finally, in 1978, Dr. Robert Wallen, who was appointed by the State Department of Health to overcome the current issues, announced a quick alert status to the residents that live near the canal, and the school was forced to close immediately.
So, for the discussion part, the disaster of Love Canal, which comes from the accumulated industrial waste that cause deterioration of the environment and diseases such as injuries, fatal death, and cancer. The disaster may be avoided if people involved are concerned and respect about the value of the community, and in specific case, the applicable codes are implemented.
But how does it occur? According to Section 2.1 of NSPE Codes of Ethics, where engineers shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. But Hooker Chemical and Plastic Company, as a licensed and qualified engineer, disposed the chemicals without being aware of the hazard and risk that may lead to disastrous events in the future. Hooker did consider the land's dangers before selling it, as they mentioned in agreement that Niagara Falls School Board must be held responsible for building the schools and homes on the land. According to Section 2.1.b of NSPE, where engineers shall approve only those engineering documents that are in conformity with applicable standards, but Niagara Falls Planning Board approved the 99th and 93rd construction of the street schools without any thorough investigation, as they permit the disposal of waste by the Hooker Chemical and Plastic Corporation. According to the NSPE Codes of Ethics under the Section 2.1e and 2.1f, where engineers who are aware of each and every possible violation towards the codes must alert the relevant specialized bodies and to the authorities, and must work together with the appropriate authorities might be needed in the provision of that knowledge or aid from them. But the school building's architect and contractors did not disclose to anyone aside from the board, as they learned the reality where the manager was actually hiding from the public point of view. According to the Code 2.3a of NSPE, where engineers shall be objective and truthful and shall include all relevant and pertinent information in such reports, statements, or testimony, which should bear the date indicating when it was current. But the Hooker Company again violated the code where there was no truth revealed by Hooker as professional engineers in respect of the position the canal was in at the moment, as it is not safe to the public. According to Section 2.5.b, where engineers shall avoid deceptive acts, engineers shall not offer or receive either directly or indirectly any contribution to influence the award of a contract by public authority, or which may be reasonably construed by the public as having the effect or intent of influencing the awarding of a contract. The deceitful action of Hooker Chemical can be seen when they sold the canal property with a dollar token with the expectation that in future, any of the event of potential pollution, they will be exempted from its liability. Even though they acknowledge that the act can eliminate the repercussions, they shall turn a blind eye to it in order to protect themselves. So what should they do to avoid the disaster? First, any document should contain information of the hazard in the development of residential areas, where the atmosphere in the area used for dumping of hazardous material. Next, Hooker Chemical and Plastic Company should have made a public announcement in an impartial and honest manner and make an earlier clarification regarding to the area as it is previously unfit for settlements before they were selling it. And lastly, before approving a certain project, engineers involved must be concerned about soil and environmental surrounding before making any judgment. They shall make public their technical opinions based on data of the facts and competency of the certain case.
Impact: abnormality of appearance, structure, and function of born babies at an unusual rate and elevated prevalence of urology conditions and asthma rooted from a severe toxicity of the nervous system. Following the declarations of emergency, the U.S. Army and Occidental Chemical Corporation were made to obey the prescribed calamity. Every family who either owned a property or even rented from a landlord were compensated and assisted in their relocations by means of accommodation. They were also paid for medical checkups for any possible medical symptoms or sign of a medical condition with regard to radioactivity and toxin, as miscarriage were reported notably intense or higher for housewives as they were living in the path of a localized column of chemicals and toxins. Virtue ethics is an advance towards the moral principle that governs a person's way of conducting himself towards others. In this case, the dumping and scrapping of disregarded materials, substances, and byproduct is not morally correct, violating and forfeiting to the public, and you all come to an end. There's a saying that honesty is the best policy. Hooker Chemical and the school board should have come clean from the beginning regarding the danger of the land to the residents and the media, with 100% of transparency without hiding their current situation when they should have. CERCLA were established to put an end to the unconstrained and forsaken perilous wayside, such as spills, accidents, seepage calamity of chemicals, and contaminations to the surroundings, much particularly the environment. To prevent further outward migrations of the toxin, all the forsaken houses were restricted and a thorough plan and construction of detailed drainage system together with and compromises of trenches, wells, and pumping stations were designed and executed. So, what went wrong? The first one is the role played by the mayor of the town, which is Michael Laughlin. Michael Laughlin should have never made a presumptuous statement without consulting with the expert, nor avoiding the truth regarding the situation told by the Hooker Company. Michael's step of making an arbitrary statement asserting that they were no unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with was an irresponsible action. Instead of guessing blindly to the situation, he should be researching and surveying everything starting from the dumping of toxin into the canal, the seal of the canal, the health report of the resident in the region, and the unusual number of birth defects and miscarriages would have raised an enough suspicion to doubt the credibility of any construction in that area. Secondly, the developer decisions to remove the impermeable cap and cement that were trying to contain the substances in the canal or this wall to create water lines and expressway were a wrong move. It was a faux pas taken by the government to proceed with the plan without taking into account the long-term damage these actions could bring to the region. The government attitudes of refusing to take notice and acknowledge Hooker's company persistency warning, and for one that the area may leak and the toxic may resurface and cause chemical burn to the residents one day, and the government's desire to take a chance on the contaminated land were so wrong and cannot be accepted no matter what.
In conclusion, toxic release in the Love Canal is the worst environmental disaster ever in the United States of America, and that was undoubtedly caused by reckless people working at the Hooker Chemical Company who were responsible for the disposal of such toxic waste. Not only that, the health and life of the residents who live in the Love Canal at that time were also affected. So based on the situation, there are two ethics that the reckless people should have followed. The first one is right and duty ethics. This ethics was about respect every single right of an individual and also the society. And the second one would be virtue ethics, which is about the disposal of the harmful chemical waste should not be done in the first place because it can cause harmful to the individual, society, and also the environment. So in order to avoid this catastrophe from happening, one should have done the proper way for the disposal of the chemical waste, because by doing so many people health and life can be saved and eventually will prevent the damaging and ruining of the surrounding environment. So to conclude, based on the previous slide, we have learned that the hazardous toxic waste and also harmful substances are very dangerous to the human health and also the environment, and people who are responsible for this act should follow the related ethics in order to prevent this catastrophe from happening. And last but not least, as the ghost saying, if you cannot clean your surrounding, then don't make it dirty. That's all from us. Thank you.